April 5th, 1942. In the Solomon Islands, the decorated destroyer USS O'Bannon cuts through black Pacific waters, closing in within 100 yards of a Japanese submarine. But now, Lucky O is a little too close. MacDonald quickly grasps the technical nightmare, his eyes widening with the potential disaster. His 5-inch guns can't angle down far enough. The torpedoes need distance to arm. Depth charges would kill them both. Years of naval drills have never accounted for this kind of fight. Close range, no margin for error. The fate of 320 American sailors now depends on a vegetable. A new ship. Following the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, critical gaps in fleet coverage left the United States Navy scrambling to reinforce convoys, respond to fast-moving threats, and fill in the vast spaces between capital ships, all at the same time. However, with existing destroyer classes lacking the endurance, firepower, or flexibility needed for what lay ahead, the Navy ordered a brand new generation of warships, the Fletcher class. USS O'Bannon, the second destroyer of her kind, was launched in early 1942. This new 375-foot-long ship displaced nearly 3,000 tons when fully loaded and had a top speed of 35 knots, more than enough to keep pace with carrier groups or outrun submarines. To take down the enemy, the vessel carried a main battery of 5-inch 38-caliber dual-purpose guns, with additional weapons of 10 torpedo tubes, depth charge projectors, and later a mix of 20 and 40mm guns. In the summer of 1942, the newly finished USS O'Bannon glided toward the Southwest Pacific, where American forces had just begun the grueling campaign for Guadalcanal, the central battleground in the wider Solomon Islands campaign, a fight that would stretch the United States Navy to its very limits. As her 320-person crew trained day in and day out for combat readiness, at the top of it all was Lieutenant Commander Edwin R. Wilkinson, a career officer determined to turn this brand new ship into one of the greatest destroyers in the entire U.S. Navy fleet. Under his command, the destroyer joined Destroyer Squadron 21 for her first combat tour, ready to serve as a guardian, supporting fleets, screening convoys, and advancing when larger vessels couldn't. From Noumea, New Caledonia, on October 9th, O'Bannon escorted carrier USS Copihi to Guadalcanal. As they neared the island, nearly 24 Marine pilots launched their F-4F Wildcats from Copihi's deck and flew them directly to Henderson Field, reinforcing the hard-pressed Allied air units battling to hold Guadalcanal. A new month brought USS O'Bannon to Noumea Harbor, where she joined Rear Admiral Daniel J. Callahan's support group to once again escort a convoy. On November 7th, just as they approached the island, lookouts on O'Bannon's bridge spotted the distinctive shape of a Japanese submarine surfacing nearby, her conning tower breaking the water's surface less than a mile from the very vulnerable American transport ships. Now, it was finally time for the destroyer to do what she did best: fight. The Naval Battle of Guadalcanal. From one moment to the next, the destroyer's alarm bells rang out all over the ship, sending sailors sprinting to battle stations, all acutely aware that one well-placed torpedo could send thousands of tons of critical supplies to the ocean floor. Aware of the incoming danger, Commander Wilkinson ordered an immediate course change, right towards the enemy vessel. As the destroyer's 5-inch guns rotated toward the target, the Pacific Ocean erupted around the submarine as shells splashed down onto her. Though the Japanese vessel quickly submerged, O'Bannon maintained position overhead, preventing her from maneuvering into firing position and leaving the convoy to pass safely beyond range. The afternoon of November 12th brought new peril, this time above, when, without any warning, 16 Japanese torpedo bombers flying in tight formation skimmed the waves, all heading straight for the vulnerable transport ships. The crew aboard O'Bannon spotted them as they closed in fast. Alarm bells rang out. Within seconds, the destroyer's anti-aircraft guns came to life. Soon, one after the other, the Japanese aircraft began to crumble from the sky, trailing smoke and flame and filling the air with the acrid smell of cordite. By the time the battle ended, 11 of the 16 enemy planes were at the bottom of the ocean. But before O'Bannon's exhausted crew could even catch their breath, let alone celebrate their first major victory, urgent news arrived through the radio. Naval intelligence reported a massive force: 2 battleships, a light cruiser, and 14 destroyers, assembling in the vicinity and now moving at full speed toward Henderson Field. At the center of it all loomed Hiei, the largest warship in the formation and a great source of imperial pride. Though the Japanese force had more than twice the firepower of the American vessels present, as Admiral Callahan's support force only consisted of 2 heavy cruisers, 3 light cruisers, and 8 destroyers, including O'Bannon, all prepared to intercept, fully aware that they were completely outgunned. In the early hours of November 13th, the American ships steamed into the waters off Guadalcanal that sailors had grimly nicknamed Iron Bottom Sound, a name earned by the numerous vessels from both navies that now rested on its floor. Right before dawn, radar contacts, sand-scattered blips, began to fill O'Bannon's screens, the clear signs of an attack about to strike. Without hesitation, Commander Wilkinson directed his destroyer toward the massive shape of the enemy battleship. Heavily armed and fast for her size, Hiei was the kind of threat most ships avoided, but not to USS O'Bannon. Instead of fear, the leader charged forward with extraordinary boldness, closing the distance until she was inside the battleship's firing arc, so close that Hiei couldn't even lower her guns enough to fire. Just then, the American destroyer's 5-inch guns fired rapidly, their muzzle flashes illuminating the night as its shell struck the battleship's superstructure. Working in teamwork with the other American vessels, O'Bannon's gunners inflicted significant damage, starting fires across Hiei's upper decks. Now, as she maneuvered through the chaos of battle, O'Bannon launched torpedoes at the now beleaguered battleship, with 2 hitting Hiei's starboard amidships, leaving her severely damaged and struggling to maintain station. Though the naval battle of Guadalcanal lasted mere hours, the price paid by America ran high. 2 light cruisers vanished beneath the waves, and 4 destroyers joined them in the depths. Meanwhile, the Japanese lost 2 destroyers, while the once mighty Hiei drifted wounded. Yet through this sacrifice, Henderson Field remained in American hands, its aircraft and runways intact. The very next day, planes from that same airfield found 7 Japanese troop transports attempting to land reinforcements and sank every single one. For her actions during the campaign, USS O'Bannon was awarded a Presidential Unit Citation, helping secure a foothold that would shift the war's momentum in the Pacific. Target spotted. In the months after the brutal Battle of Guadalcanal, O'Bannon stayed on the move. As 1943 came to an end, she'd picked up a nickname among top brass and the crews she sailed with, the Lucky O. Already, she'd faced submarines, air attacks, and a battleship at close range, yet not a single man aboard had been awarded a Purple Heart, a recognition only given to fallen men, all while performing in a theater where most destroyers took hits and major losses. Early in the new year, now with a new skipper, Lieutenant Commander Donald J. MacDonald, O'Bannon roamed the Solomons, doing everything from escorting convoys, covering landings, and hammering Japanese positions at Munda and Kalambangara. Night after night, she ran the eerie slot with Desron 21, hunting subs and cutting off enemy reinforcements. Just before dawn on April 5th, 1943, as O'Bannon and her men retired from another run up the slot, heading south after a long night of patrol leading Task Force 18, a cruiser-destroyer group, the crew of destroyer USS Strong detected an anomaly on radar, a contact at 7,000 yards distance. Wasting no time, Lieutenant Carl Kiefer, the ship's combat information officer, immediately began tracking the mysterious blip across the screen, analyzing its movement patterns and probable course. She adjusted her direction toward the threat, closing in on the contact, moving at 11 knots. According to MacDonald's official report, that night, quote, "The sea was calm. There was no moon. The night was very dark. The sky was overcast, and there were intermittent squalls." In the meantime, all hands aboard O'Bannon rushed to their battle stations. Men took positions at gun mounts, torpedo tubes, and damage control stations as the destroyer rapidly narrowed the gap. Soon, they found themselves just 2,000 yards behind the contact, but still couldn't make a positive identification through their binoculars and scopes. O'Bannon continued her approach, maneuvering closer and closer off the contact's port quarter. Only then, moonlight revealed the distinctive outline of the vessel ahead. The object of their pursuit was unmistakably Japanese. This wasn't any ship, but Row 34, a submarine that, led by Lieutenant Rikichi Tomita, had spent months operating around the Solomons, laying mines, shadowing convoys and watching the traffic lanes near Guadalcanal. At nearly 300 feet long, this mid-range Kaichu-type boat was fast on the surface, armed with torpedoes and equipped with a deck gun. But at that moment, she wasn't hunting. Running surfaced, unaware and unconcerned about nearby threats, Row 34 was completely exposed, and Lucky O was heading straight towards her. Food fight. Commander MacDonald made the call to ram the Japanese submarine, and O'Bannon charged forward with plenty of firepower to spare. But as they inched closer than ever, MacDonald spotted the distinctive features on the submarine's hull that gave him pause. This could be a mine layer, and ramming such a vessel might trigger its mines, blasting O'Bannon and everyone inside her apart. Too late to stop their momentum, MacDonald ordered a hard rudder turn, and the American destroyer lurched violently, sending a wall of water crashing over the submarine's deck. Now, as O'Bannon slid alongside the Japanese Row 34, the two were so close to each other, the sailors could have reached out and nearly touched the enemy vessel. Lining the railing, the American sailors came across the most unexpected sight. Japanese sailors sleeping soundly, completely unaware they were next to an American destroyer. But when a wave crashed over the sleeping Japs, the enemy crew blinked awake, disoriented, then froze as they registered the American destroyer looming over them. For one breathless moment, both sides stared at each other across mere feet of open ocean. Only a second later, the now fully awake Japanese sailors jolted toward their 3-inch deck gun. Sweat beaded on American foreheads as they watched the enemy crew prepare, knowing that at this range, a direct hit could punch through the destroyer's hull and cause catastrophic damage. Just then, the awful truth dawned on MacDonald. Being so close to an enemy vessel, O'Bannon's 5-inch guns couldn't depress far enough to target the submarine sitting low in the water. The torpedoes needed distance to arm. Basically, every weapon on the destroyer was useless. As American sailors frantically searched the deck lockers for handheld weapons to fend off the Japanese gunners, their hands found only sack after sack of starchy, brown, main-source potatoes, still waiting to be peeled. In that moment of desperate inspiration, the sailors of the Lucky O grabbed this unlikely ammunition by the armful. The first potato arced through the night air and then struck the submarine's hull with a hollow yet powerful metallic thud. More followed in rapid succession, a strange barrage raining down upon the Japanese vessel, bouncing and then rolling across the submarine's wet deck, some splitting open on impact. The Japanese sailors at the deck gun froze, as they could not identify the objects falling around them, only that they struck with force and made sounds remarkably similar to armed grenades hitting metal. And so, what began as confusion transformed into full panic as the enemy sailors scrambled across the submarine's deck, diving behind equipment for cover, some flattening themselves against the conning tower. Others, once they realized the strange objects weren't exploding, gathered up the intact potatoes and hurled them back toward the destroyer looming above them. Seizing the momentary confusion, MacDonald ordered O'Bannon to back away, slowly but surely, out of the danger zone. With every yard gained, her weapons edged closer and closer to firing range. True or not? Once at 300 yards, the destroyer's 5-inch guns finally had the necessary depression angle. The gun crews swung into action, aiming at the submarine's conning tower and preparing to strike. Realizing the imminent danger in the midst of the bizarre food fight, Lieutenant Rikichi Tomita ordered an emergency dive. Just then, the destroyer's Strong arrived just in time to join the hunt, directing her weapons at the fleeing submarine. Now, at proper firing distance, the Lucky O's gun crews worked in unison. Though the first shells raced through the air, they splashed right by the submarine's hull. Without missing a beat, the gunners corrected their aim, and the next salvo found its mark, making a brilliant flash erupt as the shell struck Row 34's conning tower right before the waters closed over her. Anticipating this diving move, MacDonald ordered full speed ahead, the destroyer charging across the spot where the submarine had submerged. Now, the destroyer's stern vibrated as depth charge racks released their powerful payload, sending cylindrical charges splashing into the sea to hunt the submarine beneath. Just after 3:19 a.m., sonar picked up renewed contact, so O'Bannon circled back and dropped 8 more, a powerful spread of explosions meant to crush the submarine from all sides. Finally, As oil and debris rose to the surface, the ship's crew marked the coordinates of what they believed to be Row 34's final resting place, defeated by American firepower and, unexpectedly, a barrage of potatoes. Back on the mainland, news of the Pacific War's strangest battle spread fast. Papers claimed O'Bannon had sunk a submarine with nothing but spuds, a wild exaggeration, but one the public loved. The story of the Lucky O raced across headlines, growing with every retelling. Though Commander MacDonald tried to set the record straight, the crew didn't mind. Not long after, the Maine Potato Growers Association sealed the legend with a bronze plaque engraved with a sailor hurling a potato that would stay on the ship for years to come. Military records would eventually reveal that Row 34 survived its encounter with O'Bannon, only to meet its end hours later on the evening of April 7th, when the destroyer Strong finished what O'Bannon had started. Not done yet. Following her iconic Tuber battle, the Lucky O continued to carve her place in the black waters of the Solomons, slugging it out in some of the fiercest night battles of the war. On July 6th at Kula Gulf, she charged into a fierce close-quarters melee alongside 3 cruisers and 2 other destroyers, ambushing Japanese warships in the middle of the night. By the time the guns finally fell silent, the Americans had cleared the Gulf of enemy ships, though at the cost of a cruiser. Just a week later, at Kolombangara, she faced an even larger force, a Japanese cruiser with 9 escorts. In the chaos of another nighttime slugfest, the Americans blew the cruiser Jinsu apart and drove off the surviving ships. By now, O'Bannon had proven herself not just lucky, but one of the Navy's premier night-fighting destroyers, fast, aggressive, and deadly in the dark. For 2 months, O'Bannon, patrolling with her sister ships, haunted Vela Gulf like a persistent ghost, guarding marine landings, disrupting Japanese troop movements, and fighting off near-constant air attacks. On October 6th, at the Battle of Vela La Vela, she and fellow destroyers Selfridge and Chevalier were tasked with intercepting a Japanese evacuation force of 9 destroyers and support craft. Outnumbered 2-1, the trio surged ahead at 33 knots, torpedoes and guns roaring, turning the destroyer Yugumo into a flaming wreck. However, both Selfridge and Chevalier took torpedo hits, and as the latter reeled from the damage, O'Bannon collided with her wounded sister, steel grinding steel. While fresh American destroyers raced after the fleeing enemy, the Lucky O remained behind, pulling survivors from the sea until the crew pulled the last one. By March 18, 1944, after thorough repairs, she returned to the Solomons to support the island-hopping campaigns, supporting landings from the Bismarcks to the Palaus as Allied forces closed in on the Philippines. In October, O'Bannon escorted critical reinforcements to Leyte, arriving on the 24th, just as the massive Battle of Leyte Gulf erupted across the region. She took up guard duty in the northern transport area, protecting the vulnerable supply lines that kept the invasion moving. End of the line. Throughout 1945, the Lucky O swept through Philippine waters, her guns supporting invasion after invasion. From Ormoc Bay, Mindoro, Lingayen Gulf, Bataan, Corregidor, Palawan, Zamboanga, Cebu, and Caraboa, Japanese aircraft frequently tested her anti-aircraft batteries. During the Lingayen Gulf campaign on January 31st, O'Bannon joined 3 fellow destroyers in a coordinated submarine hunt, ultimately sinking a submerged contact, later identified through captured records as Row 115. By mid-June, O'Bannon had taken up carrier screening duty off Okinawa, holding the outer perimeter as flat tops launched wave after wave of strikes against the small isles off Sakashima Gunto, fighting through sleepless nights and near-daily alerts. The following month, as Japan reeled and the end drew closer, she pressed north with the fleet, guarding the carriers as they struck deep into Honshu and Hokkaido, the final air blows of the war. On August 27th, after Japan surrendered, Admiral William Halsey handpicked her, along with destroyers Nicholas and Taylor, for the highest honor a destroyer could receive, escorting the battleship Missouri into Tokyo Bay for the surrender ceremony. The trio was chosen, according to the Admiral, quote, because of their valorous fight up the long road from the South Pacific to the very end. After the war, O'Bannon was refitted as an escort destroyer and quickly returned to action, joining United Nations forces during the Korean War, guarding carriers, serving as flagship for blockade operations, and shelling enemy positions along the coastline. In the summer of 1962, She took part in nuclear weapons testing at Johnston Island, her crew witnessing atmospheric detonations that would soon be outlawed by international treaty. Between combat deployments, O'Bannon made a brief appearance in a Hollywood film and later supported the U.S. space program, serving on the recovery team for returning Apollo astronauts. Finally, on January 30th, 1970, the Lucky O was decommissioned at Pearl Harbor in a ceremony. The plaque commemorating her most unusual battle tactic remained with her until the end. By then, she'd earned the Presidential Unit Citation, 17 battle stars for World War II service, plus 3 more battle stars in Korea, making her one of the most decorated American warships in history. Most remarkably, throughout years of fierce combat, from Guadalcanal to Tokyo Bay, not a single crew member received a Purple Heart, truly living up to her nickname. As Admiral Halsey later reflected, quote, "The history of the Pacific War can never be written without telling the story of the USS O'Bannon. Time after time, the O'Bannon and her gallant little sisters were called upon to turn back the enemy. They never disappointed me."